Hello and welcome to While You're at the Library. We're all gathered around our own little living room table here, and thank you for letting us join you at yours. And we have all sorts of books and exciting events to talk about, and we'll just jump right in. I'm Catherine Poulter, the Children's Services Supervisor, and here is John. I'll let you introduce yourself, John.
My name is John Bickelhaupt, and I work in reference.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm Kath Ann Hendricks. I'm the Young Adult Librarian.
I'm Becky Hadley. I'm the lead circulation librarian.
I'm Trent Clegg. I'm a reference specialist as well.
Very good. So we have a lot of good people here today, and you can see the stacks of books. There's a lot of books that we're going to talk about, and probably some other things too. Trent, why don't we start with you? Take a couple of books and discuss them.
I have here two books. One is called Moscow Nights. The other one is called When the World Stopped to Listen. These books were released within about 6 months of each other, one late in 2016 and one about 6 months ago. These are both about the pianist Van Cliburn. I don't know how many people would know that name today, but Van Cliburn was a young Texas piano prodigy who competed in the first international Tchaikovsky piano competition in the Soviet Union, and this was in April of 1958. It was the height of the Cold War. There was a lot of anxiety between the United States and the USSR, and the fact that this piano competition was happening was a big deal. The Soviets had already picked who was going to win the competition.
A Soviet?
A Soviet, yes.
They already knew.
As it turned out, Mr. Cliburn, his renditions of Russian music were so stirring to the mainly Russian audience that he just couldn't be denied the prize. And so these two books are basically about how this young musician started to thaw relations between the United States and the Soviets, and also some of the negative consequences that the political climate and all the things that happened around this competition, some of the consequences that happened to him as well. So it's not only about him winning the competition, but it's also about him, his life. My very favorite piano record when I was a kid was My Favorite Chopin. I would put it on my father's turntable and just listen. This one, When the World Stopped to Listen, is written by Stuart Isikoff, who is also a pianist. And so this book, it goes into a little bit more about why his playing was so special, you know, what it was about him as a musician that made him so irresistible to the Russian people. Mm-hmm. And this one, by Nigel Cliff, it focuses more on the politics. So those who are not familiar with American and Soviet politics, this would probably be a better volume to start with to find out what was going on and why it was such a big deal internationally. Mm-hmm. So anyway, these books are both available in the 700s, and we can help you find them.
And I have a question.
Yes.
Are there also recordings of, maybe not that particular performance, but of the things that he played, so that people could maybe listen as they're reading?
That is a very, very good question. I'll have to go to the library and check that out. Okay. I know we do have some piano music at the library. We should make sure we have some of his.
Yeah, there you go.
Very good. Thank you.
Get the book on audio, and maybe they'll have
Samples.
Yeah.
Oh,
you never know.
Thank you. Good. Becky.
Well, I brought a historical fiction that's actually from the children's section. Becky mentioned it last time when we had her on the show last month, The War That Saved My Life, and she made it sound so great that I checked it out after she talked about it, and this book is awesome. So just a quick recap of what she talked about last time. The main character, Ada, is a 10-year-old girl, and she has a club foot that hasn't been treated at all. And so she crawls around.
She can't walk.
She can't walk. Her little brother, Jamie, he's perfectly normal, is getting ready to go to school. Well, they live in London at the time of World War II, and they are sent to the country.
Tell about her mean mom.
Oh, her mom is awful. She's so mean. She won't let Ada even learn how to walk, and she picks on her really bad. if Jamie does anything bad, she usually punishes Ada in place.
Ooh.
And oftentimes there's a little leaky cupboard that she gets locked into. It's a very sad part. But they get sent off to the country, and with all the kids, the train is full of all these kids, and different children get picked to go live with different families, and they're left. And so the woman in charge puts them in the car and takes them off to Susan Smith's house. And Susan at first doesn't want to take anybody in. She doesn't know how to take care of children. She's never had any of her own. But soon she falls in love with Ada and Jamie, and is a super sweet lady that gives them many opportunities. Meanwhile, she has a horse named Butter, which is a dream come true for Ada. And Ada learns how to ride the horse. She learns how to walk with crutches. And she hears that there's a surgery that can be done to fix her foot. And they await a letter from her mom to give permission. Mm-hmm. Anyways, this is quite an eye-opener of some things that could have happened to the children at that time that went to the country. I don't want to give too much of the story away, but it is heart-wrenching. There's parts where you laugh, where you cry, and it's not just a book for kids. I think all ages would enjoy this book. So, on a little bit happier note.
And it's a young reader's choice.
Yes,
nominee.
It's on the Young Reader Choice list for this year, so it's one that the kids get a vote on in March out of a list of books. So that one is a little bit more on the depressing side, so I thought I better bring one that's a little bit happier. So this is another one from the Juvenile Fiction section, Orphan Island by Laurel Snyder. And this one has a little bit, I want to say a little bit of magic behind it. So there's this island that has 9 orphans on it. And they're all...
Always 9.
Always 9. Never more, never less. And they're all like a year apart, I imagine. And the oldest one is called the Elder. And every year there comes this little boat. And in the boat is a young orphan. And the young orphan gets off, and the elder orphan gets in the boat and goes away.
So for a very brief moment, there are 10 orphans.
Very brief moment, yes. And then the new elder steps up and helps teach this young orphan how to live on the island, because they live off of the island. So Ginny has just become the elder orphan, and her best friend has just gone away in the boat, and it's just the saddest day in her life. And the youngest orphan, whose name is S, E-S-S, so they say it sounds a lot like yes, so S, and she takes her under her wing and tries to teach her things. And she never wants to think about the day the boat will come. And it's got a lot of cute parts in it. It tells you different ways the island takes care of these children. And they have a journal from Abigail that was one of the first orphans on the island, or so they think. And there's books, and in the margin she's written notes about her favorite stories or stories that she might not have liked. And so they're always thinking all these awesome things about Abigail. Well, a day finally comes that the boat arrives. And in it is a little boy whose name is Lou. And he gets out, and everybody's saying goodbye to Ginny. And instead of getting in the boat, she drags it ashore and says, "I'm not leaving." And that's when things begin to change. The island no longer does a lot of the things it used to do, and things start, I want to say, falling apart and breaking. One of the examples I'll give, because it doesn't give too much of the story away, is always before the snakes on the island were cuddly. You could put your hand down and play with them and everything. And now the snakes are wanting to fight back. They don't want to be so snuggly. So that's one of the changes. Very interesting book. I'm hoping there'll someday be a sequel. The author is currently writing Abigail's journal.
Ooh.
So that's kind of exciting. So kind of more of a prequel. So that's that'll be fun to look into. It probably won't come out for a while. But anyways, Orphan Island, and I think this is a kind of a newer book. It was on one of the displays in the children's section, but if you don't see it on a display, it'll just be under Snyder in junior fiction.
You checked out to one of us.
Or checked out to one of us. We can always put you on hold if it's checked out.
Thank you, Becky. That was great.
Well, I think I'll speak of another juvenile fiction, which
One of the
really could
best
be,
kinds of books
it
in the
could
library.
be a young adult too. This book is called The List, and it's by Patricia Ford. And think of The Giver. It's very similar in that respect, except in this story, this is set in the future after a catastrophic event. You sort of parse this out as you go through the story, and you learn in the beginning that this is about a girl named Letta and her master Benjamin. They live in this town called the Ark. The Ark is overseen by a man named John Noah, N-O-A. Well,
Does he have two of everything?
he actually
Two
was
mosquitoes.
part of a group of people who were, I guess I can tell you about it, even though it's really more towards the end. They were trying to warn people about global warming. Okay, and so you don't get all the political part of this and how it relates to current times right now until closer to the end of the story. But John Noah is trying to protect these people, and so you have to be within the gates of this city to be provided with food and water and clothing. And it's not, and electricity, but there's only a limited amount of all of these things. Outside of the gates of the Ark, there's Tin Town and where the Desecrates live. They're people who didn't get in the gates soon enough, and so they have to live on the outside. The Ark is special because there are a limited number of words they can use. John Noah felt that language was the cause of what happened. And so the wordsmith's job is to collect words, transcribe the word and the definition on cards, and then keep a supply of these. And when John Noah decides that it's time for a change, he'll say, this is the list. These are the words that you may speak. At this time, they can only speak 700 words. Each child is given a tally stick as they grow up. And if you speak a word that is not on that list, you get a little mark on your tally stick. And if you get too many marks on your tally stick,
How many?
I don't remember how many it is. It might be
10,000?
like 10 or something, 10 marks on the stick. If you get too many, you're banished, and you have to live in the woods with wild animals. Of course, if you're understanding that everything else in the world has been destroyed and all the zoos have been letting, all wild animals are out there, that, they don't expect that you're going to survive. He has enforcers they call gavers, and they make sure that you obey the laws. And so Letta is an apprentice to the wordsmith, and it's her job to learn how to make the ink, to write the cards out, have boxes ready for the teacher to provide to her students so she knows which words are the words that they are allowed to learn. And they speak in very simple sentences, so they leave out a lot of things like who you go,
They don't have the verb are?
No, they don't have these, and they don't have words like hope and faith and love, because John Noah doesn't feel that there is any hope. And every chapter begins with a word and a number by it. Like this one says danger, harm or hurt can happen. So you have your one card that has the title of the.
So the definitions have to be in those same 700 words.
Right,
too.
and she has times where she has to give boxes, or they have to give a box of words to the gavers, because they have special words that they have to teach their apprentices, or the cook, or the healer, or whoever is has a profession. They'll have some special words that nobody else can use but their particular apprentices. And the wordsmith is allowed, and Letta, they are allowed to speak normally, and so is John Noah, but only with those people. They're not allowed to speak to other people this way. Well, in the very beginning of the story, Benjamin, her master, goes out on a word search or word hunt. And while he is gone, somebody comes in her door who's been injured. And his name is Marlowe, which is not an accepted name in the Ark. So she knows right away something's wrong. And he's been, like shot with something, so he's bleeding. And so she's kind of panics and she hides him, because on his heels comes a couple of gabbers looking for him. So she doesn't know why, but she wants to protect him. And it's not a gun that shoots him, but it's something that causes infection and fever and everything. But he eventually recovers enough that she's able to get him back to his people. He is one of the desecrates. And she struggles, because Benjamin is gone for the longest time, she struggles with, some of the things that she's learning from Marlowe, and then things that she's finding out about John Noah. They took a child away from the healer's family across the street, and they banished him. And I think it might have been because he had too many marks on his tally stick. But at any rate, Marlowe leaves, and then she needs his help, and then she finds out that Benjamin has died. And that's John Noah has told her that. But then she gets some strange notes. Somebody leaves a piece of paper in her office or her shop, and it says, "Benjamin not dead." And she doesn't know who has left her this message. So now she has hope, and she wants to find him. Very interesting to read and to think about, the power of words and the things that he has taken away from the people, music and art, and
He's a
any
bad
kind
guy.
of. He's
a madman.
Madman, maybe, an idealist. Formerly, he and Benjamin used to be great friends prior to this, what they call the melting. So all the ice caps have melted and flooded the coastlines, and Benjamin and the people that were aware of what was happening figured out where the safest places to be would be to, so they could be protected, and they built their ark, their city, in that spot. And they figured out how to purify water from seawater, but they only provide limited amounts. And everybody's allowed to have 2 children and 2 children only. And Letta at this time is not, when she's 18, she can choose a mate, but she's not 18 yet. So it was pretty interesting. It does get rather political if you don't want to read about the whole thing about global warming, then you probably might not like this book. But I thought it was really well done, and an interesting look at what we consider important, and how words are important to us, and whether or not they are the root of all evil, as John
Words
Noah
are
believes.
important to me.
But John Noah believes that they are what caused the melting. So, The List by Patricia Ford, if you like The Giver, this would be another book that you might consider reading.
Great, thank you very much. John, what do you have there?
Well, I'm going to put in a plug for the Nonfiction book group that I've been leading.
Oh, yes.
And our next book is going to be The Big Short by Michael Lewis. He also wrote Moneyball and Liar's Poker. And what he does is he takes subjects that deal a lot with statistics and finances, and he makes them accessible. And this book is about the collapse of the housing market in 2007, 2008. And he goes into how it happened, but the main story is about a small group of men who not only foresaw that it was going to happen, because a fair number of people knew that the market was irrational and that it was
a bubble.
yeah, and that it was going to collapse, but they identified the securities that were going to be implicated in the collapse, and then they figured out how to bet against them. And so they ended up doing quite well out of the
Making money off of
it. But they were conflicted about it because
morally,
because it seemed kind of wrong. But at the same time, the the vehicles that they bet against were immoral in the sense that they were being misappraised. They were bonds that were basically they were bonds, securities that were given AAA ratings, and they were
Worthless,
or pretty nearly worthless. And so it was kind of collusion between the rating agencies and the investment banks that issued the bonds, and they kept it going far longer than it should have gone on. So this is very interesting. And the reason it's called The Big Short is, you know what a short is? It's like
a short in a wire.
when you short an investment.
Oh,
It's a short sale, yeah.
Short sell.
Short
Well,
sell.
in the case of a stock, what you do is you go to somebody and you borrow a bunch of stock from them and agree to return it on a certain date. And then once you've got it, you sell it, and then when the date comes around, you buy it back. And if, as you have expected or hoped, it's dropped in value, you get to keep the difference between the
initial cost.
the initial cost, and what you got when you sold it, and what you had to spend to get it back. So, and so that's essentially what they're doing. Only in the case of these securities, what they're doing is they end up actually buying some form of insurance. So it's really interesting, and it's a little bit confusing. It's kind of opaque, and one of the points he makes is that the securities were actually designed that way, to be opaque, because one of the ways in which the financial powers that be get to hang on to their power is by
Knowing more than everybody else.
right, or at least seeming to, because one of the things you get out of this is that a lot of them didn't know more than anybody else, and so it was pretty.
And they lost money.
And they lost money. So it's a pretty interesting book. And this is going to be the next one in the nonfiction book group. We'll be meeting to discuss it on January 17th at 7 p.m. And
I'll be there.
yeah, and so people who are interested should get this book and read it and take some blood pressure medication first. So.
Good, thank you. I have been reading a trilogy called the Dark Elf Trilogy. It is about a night elf who lives in the pitch black dark down deep down underground, and he and his culture are, well, they don't have values such as loyalty and kindness and things like that. Instead, they're out for power. All except for Drizzt, who is an elf with morals. And he doesn't like all the killing that's happening. And so though he gets really good at using the scimitars and any kind of weapon that you can think of, taught to him by his father, he doesn't want to use them to get power. And this is a good story. I've been so intrigued by it. About Drizzt the Dark Elf and his crusade for good against evil. So I'm reading now, this is a trilogy, so I'm reading the 3rd volume already, and it's really good. There's monsters and goblins and of course elves and dwarves, all sorts of creatures and intrigue and spiders. It's very interesting. So that was something I've been reading. So I recommend it. I never thought I would like it, but I really do.
He is a famous.
Yeah, I'd never read anything by
R.A.
him, but a
Salvatore.
friend of mine recommended it, and sure enough, it's exciting and good. So show us something else you have. Ooh, that's beautiful.
Okay. This book is called The Jazz Age, American Style in the 1920s. And this book is lavishly
Whoa.
illustrated with lots and lots of gorgeous color pictures of art and architecture and objects that were made for people's use in the 1920s. But this book is more than just a picture book to peruse through. It talks about how the aftermath of World War I caused an exchange, an intense exchange, between the United States and Europe. And so there was this huge cross-pollination of influences between the two countries, well, between the European continent and the United States, in the realms of music and art and dance and architecture and art, and how jazz changed the face of European art and architecture, and how all of these Americans that had not really been exposed to European culture before, all of a sudden, you know, the 1920s were a very prosperous time economically, so a lot more Americans were traveling, and they wanted to go see Europe, this country that they'd heard so much about. And so they would go and they'd see these lands that had been around for hundreds and thousands of years, and their art and their architecture, and they would come home changed. And so the Jazz Age was this huge confluence of thoughts and ideas that manifested themselves in everyday objects and in, you know, not so everyday objects. A lot of the architecture that is iconic, say like in New York City or in Chicago, this was built during the Jazz Age. A lot of the Art Deco style that replaced what had been previously the fashion, which was Art Nouveau. And so we've had this book for about a couple of months. It hasn't checked out a lot, really. But I think it's just because people don't understand what an amazing time this Jazz Age was for the creation of beautiful, beautiful things out of the thoughts that people were having. So.
Ooh, I want to check it out.
The Jazz Age. Yeah.
I want the coffee service.
I'd like that chair we just saw.
Chair.
Well, and you know, we don't see a lot of art that is in our everyday lives, but back at this time, even common objects were still there was still some art that was invested into them. You know, the crown moldings that you would see in old buildings, even the simple lines in woodworking, like you go down to the Kane building that was built in 1914 there in Old Town, and you look at some of the original woodwork, and the detailing, it's not lavish, but it's still there, and it adds to the feeling. And here in our postmodern era, whatever we're calling this these days, people don't deal so much with the physical world as they did back then, and so we have a lot of very plain things, or things that exist in something that you have to manipulate with your thumbs. And that's it.
Ooh, I'm going to change that.
We should, well, I have my thoughts on that. But here we are, the Jazz Age, American art in the 1920s.
Thank you. Becky.
Well, I have a new adult fiction book by Charlie
looks like a children's
Holmberg. No, this is for adults.
Oh, the fifth doll.
The Fifth Doll. Charlie Holmberg. You might recognize her name from The Paper Magician. A while back I talked about Followed by Frost that was by her. Well, this is her brand new book. Just came out. I was the first one to check it out. So excited. Okay, so on the back it says, "What is the secret of the fifth doll, and what will Matrona risk to find out?" Okay, so Matrona is our main character, and she is 26 years old, and a lot of people in the village wonder why she hasn't been married off yet, because, I don't know, by then you should be married, apparently, in this little Russian village. And so there's been an agreement made between some fathers that she's finally going to be married, and she's not exactly thrilled about the idea. And so one day she's walking home from this, and she's got her head down because she's upset, and there's a paintbrush on the ground. And she realizes that it belongs to the local tradesman. And I think you say his name Slava, is how I think you say it. Anyways, he's a tradesman, and he's got this really big, extravagant house. And she goes to his house, and knocks and nobody's apparently there, but she can hear something. So she goes in. You should never do that. She goes in to return this paintbrush, and she can just hear this noise. So she follows through the house to see this noise, and she opens this room, and it is filled with these dolls. And these are the stacking dolls, Etruska dolls, I think is what they're called. And as she looks at them, she realizes there is one for every person in the village.
Freaky.
And so
She recognizes
their faces, yes. And so she picks up the one that is for her dad, and she notices the seam in it, and so she opens it.
And he dies?
Well, then she hears...
He falls apart.
Then she hears that Slava is actually home. So she quickly puts the doll together and leaves the paintbrush and just leaves. Well, when she gets home, Dad is acting really strange. He is off like in his own little world, not finishing sentences. It's really weird. So she knows she has to go back and see what is behind these dolls. Well, when she gets there, Slava is waiting for her. He knows that it's her, and he says, "You've been chosen, you're going to be my apprentice to learn about the dolls." And he straightens up the father's doll, which fixes the father. And so she knows that...
Are they humans?
They are humans. They are humans, yes. There's just magic behind the dolls. So she is told that she has to open all of her dolls. But you can't open them all at once. So she has to open them every 3 days, and she's been told there's 5 dolls. So the first day she opens it, and as soon as she leaves Slava's house, everybody knows all of her secrets. Which, if you just stop and think for a second, if everybody knew all of your secrets, it would be a pretty rough day. Now, these are not just secrets of, oh, I snuck the candy bar that was in the top cupboard. No, these are even some thoughts you've had.
He's so cute.
Exactly, those ones too. Okay, so pretty soon she knows everybody thinks about her future husband. Which is not that great. Okay, so 3 days later, she is told she has to open the second doll. And so she goes, she's like, okay, what can be worse than everybody knowing everything about me?
You never ask that question.
Exactly. So she opens the second doll, and everything appears to be fine until she leaves Slavia's house. And when she leaves, it suddenly just hits her, this big, like, thing of depression. It's like awful. Any bad thought you've ever had about yourself. Mm. So if you've looked yourself in the mirror and thought, oh, you're so ugly, it comes right back to you. Or, well, you can fill in the blanks. Anything that you've ever thought bad about yourself. So she goes home and crawls into bed and cries a lot. Well, she doesn't want to open the next doll because these first 2 dolls were horrible. So she tries to get out of it. She decides she's going to go hide in the forest. And that's when she realizes that they're trapped in the village. So she goes from the west into the forest, and she goes through the forest, and she ends up on the east side of the village. She does this all day long. It doesn't matter which side she goes into, she always ends up at the opposite end of town. Well, Slavia knows that she is trying to escape, and he hunts her down. And he has, sitting on his table, Mom and Dad's dolls. And he's like, do I need to adjust to their dolls? And she's like, no, I will open my next doll. When she opens the third doll, she sees images of things she's never seen before, like snow. They've never had snow. This is a Russian town, and she's never seen snow. If you think, weird. That's very odd. Okay. This is when she's starting to realize there's something going on here with this village. Now, her best friend, Jaska, his mom's a little crazy.
Does she love Yaska?
I don't know the answer to that. And she's always talking about snow. And so when Matrona starts asking people about snow, they realize that there's something wrong with her dolls. So she asks about it. It's not the third day, so she can dare go to Slavia's house without having to open a doll. And she's told that she opened all of her dolls too fast, and it made her go crazy.
Oh.
Yes. So
The mom.
the mom.
Ah.
Yes. So that's why she has to wait 3 days in between. Well, Jaska wants to know more about his mom, and so he convinces Matrona to open his first doll. Yes. And Slavia gets very angry. Okay, so I don't want to give too much of the story away because there's a lot more to go into this.
Wow.
But I really don't want to give too much away. Let's see. So when she goes to open the fourth doll, she's going to be brave. And I'm going to tell you, the fourth doll is empty. Dun, dun, dun.
So where's the fifth doll?
That's the question.
That's the question.
That's the question. What is the secret behind the fifth doll? And the village.
Oh my
That
God.
seems to be fake.
She is the fifth doll.
And
Oh, I don't know.
is Slavia good or evil? So, the fifth doll by Charlie Holmberg. So good. Page turner. You can read it in a weekend. Awesome. So,
Wow, thank you.
Well, I don't know if I can follow that one.
Oh, try.
I am going to follow that with a quick discussion about our upcoming 12 Days of Making.
Oh, very good.
So on December 11th, we're going to do our annual 12 Days of Making, which will be a little bit longer than 12 days because
Who's
we're
counting?
going to carry it through the end of December. And we will have a different project or craft or STEM activity every single day, Monday through Friday at 3:30, from 3:30 to 4:30 or so. Sponsored by different staff members. Catherine is one, and Becca, the other children, our children's
And Cresta.
and Cresta, and myself. And it will involve, maybe making something for the holidays or
Something electric
something. I am going to do something with paper circuits again.
or Legos.
And we will have our regular Lego club, but we'll have it as a holiday Lego club, and it will be instead of at 5:30 because our hours in December changed.
Thank you.
Our hours will be from 10 until 6 every single day, Monday through Saturday, for the whole month of December, and then we will go back to our regular hours in January. So don't forget, we are not going to be open in the evenings, and we will be opening 1 hour later. And we do this so we can have staff in-service training and things that we need to do in the library and special projects that we need to get done. So it gives us 1 hour a day to do those things in. The day that we do the making every day will be at 3:30, from 3:30 to 4:30, and so therefore Lego Club will be earlier than normal. And I'm going to have one day, probably the 15th, I think, of December, which is a Friday when we normally do our STEM activities, in which we will do some, for younger kids, they can decorate something we've made on the 3D, with a 3D printer, something like a holiday ornament. Then for those who want to experiment with designing their own ornament, I'm going to do a quick tutorial with Tinkercad.
Great.
And we'll try to have something for all ages on that. But I was experimenting with that today with another patron, and it was really a lot of fun. It takes a lot of work, so it takes a lot of. If you ever done anything with CAD design, then I think that's makes it a little bit easier. But it's worth doing. It's something that's challenging, and then you can see your creation. It won't all be able to be printed on that day, but
Over time.
we can do that over time. So I'm really looking forward to doing that.
Cool.
And I know Catherine's going to have several fiber arts projects on the Wednesdays when she normally has her knitting and crocheting day.
It's going to be so fun.
We
yeah.
have lots of fun things to do.
Lots of fun things.
So,
Yeah. Thank you. That was
You're
a good follow up. Thank you.
good.
John.
Well,
Oh, that's a thick book. Is it heavy?
yes, it is. It's very heavy. This is the Video Hound's Golden Movie Retriever 2017. And I don't know if there's a new one. There may very well be a new one by now, but this is for the last year. And this is published by Gale Research. And I used to work for them. But this is a wonderful book if you're into movies, because what it does is it gives us brief synopsis of each movie that's listed, and it rates it. And really great movies are rated 4 bones, and movies that aren't so great are rated fewer bones.
What if it's a really terrible movie?
If it's a really bad movie, it's
Skull.
given a woof.
A woof.
No.
So I've picked out a couple of movies to just read their synopses for. It's the way it's indexed is really good too, because they have it indexed by movie title. They have movies indexed by subject,
romantic.
and then they have movies indexed by actor, and then movies indexed by director too. So there's a whole
cool.
bunch of different ways to look up movies. But the first one I'm going to read you is called Plan 9 from Outer Space. Woof. Grave Robbers from Outer Space. That's another title. 2 or 3 aliens in silk pajamas conspire to resurrect several slow-moving zombies from a cardboard graveyard in order to conquer the Earth. Spaceships that look suspiciously like paper plates blaze across the sky. Pitiful, inadvertently hilarious fright is in the running for the Dumbest Movie Ever Made award. Lugosi's actual screen time, Bela Lugosi was one of the stars, is under 2 minutes, since he died before the film was complete. Enjoy the taller and younger replacement, the chiropractor of Wood's wife they found for Lugosi, who remains hooded to protect his identity. Okay. And then they list all of the actors, and the director, of course, is Edward D. Wood, Jr. Okay. So that movie was a woof. Right? Now, here's another movie. Okay. Okay, where is it?
There's a lot of movies on
Did I
that
miss
page.
it? Yeah, there's quite a few. Ed Wood, okay, 1994. 3.5 bones.
Ooh,
Okay.
Out of how many?
4.
Out of 4.
Oh, wow. This must be a
So-
good one.
Leave it to Burton to bring to the screen the story of a director many consider to be the worst of all time. He's at least in the top 3. And who now occupies a lofty position as a cult icon. In this hilarious and touching tribute to a Hollywood maverick with grade Z vision, detailed homage is paid to Wood's single-mindedness and optimism in the face of repeated failure and lack of financing, even down to the black and white photography. Depp is convincing and engaging as Ed Wood Jr., that's Johnny Depp, the cross-dressing, Angora sweater-wearing, low-budget auteur of such notoriously bad cult films as Glenn or Glenda and Plan 9 from Outer Space. Depp is supported by terrific portrayals of the motley Wood crew, led by Martin Landau's morphine-addicted, down-on-his-luck Bela Lugosi. Burton focuses on Wood's relationship with Lugosi, whose career is over by the time Wood befriends him. It's based on Rudolph Gray's book, Nightmare of Ecstasy, The Life and Art of Edward D. Wood, Jr. So,
Wow, so the original movie, the movie that was made got a woof.
right. But
And the movie that was made
about the movie
about
that
the
was
movie
made.
being made got 3 bones.
3.5 bones.
3.5 bones.
Yeah, so it's Tim Burton. So yeah, so this is a good movie. It was a lot of fun.
And that text is so interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of breezy, you know. It's I like it. I'm going to look up one more here, just because one of my favorite movies. I'm not sure I remember what they said about it.
I've got to see Plan 9 from Outer Space. That sounds hilarious.
It's bad. It's like they have scenes that are shot in daylight, and then they're followed immediately by scenes that are night. That are supposed to be happening at the same time. And it's just like it's like, oh, people will understand it. So okay.
This is how people used to look things up before Google, everybody.
Oh no, it's not even in here.
Which one? The one about the dog?
Dean Spanley, yeah.
I remember that you love that one. I saw it once with you.
Yeah, oh well.
Okay.
Okay, well, maybe they'll figure it out and put it in some other time.
Well, that is.
Oh, maybe it's my conversations with Dean Spanley.
He's going to find it yet.
Give me another minute here.
I would need a magnifying glass to read that.
It's very small print.
There are a lot of movies, aren't there?
There are.
How far back do they go?
Are they only English movies?
No, they have some foreign films in here too. I think they mainly do films that were released in the United States.
That would make sense.
So, well, no, it's not here either. So.
Oh well.
Oh well, that's too bad.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Is there another one you'd like to share?
Well, I'm just trying one more little thing here. See if I recognize any of these.
You've seen a lot of
with
movies.
You over there, or
The
what?
Conversation.
Oh,
3.5 Bones. This is a Francis Ford Coppola movie. It starred Gene Hackman. It was made in 1974. And if you've never seen it, it's a great movie. Freelance surveillance expert Harry Call, played by Hackman, is becoming increasingly uneasy about his current job for a powerful businessman, played by Robert Duvall. He and his assistant Stan are watching a young couple when Harry begins to suspect that they are murder targets. Powerful statement about privacy, responsibility, and guilt. One of the best movies of the 70s.
Wow.
So,
and there you have it.
and there you have it.
That's almost like going to the movies itself.
In a way, and it pretty much guarantees you that you'll pick out a good one. So.
Oh, that's good. Really quickly, I have to share this breaking news. We've had the 2nd annual Million Minute Marathon, Mayor's Million Minute Marathon. And while all but one school's results have come in, we have, from the children of Pocatello, more than 333,000 minutes read. That translates to thousands of hours. And I'm so proud of our kids. The winning school was Indian Hills Elementary with 64,000 minutes. Wow. In second place was Ellis with 56,000. I need to share this. Amazingly enough, the Calvary Chapel Christian School won with 54% of their student body participating.
Wow.
Followed by Washington Elementary with 26%. And the Washington Elementary also won the highest average per reader, which was 588 minutes.
Wow.
Amazing. We have some wonderful readers here in Pocatello. And when that final number comes in, I will share it again. So that's what I have. I think we have time for another of your books, Trent, and I see some really beautiful ones that you have
Well,
there.
I'm going to touch on all 3 of them quickly because since they're all
great,
3
you can.
related. This first one, Degas, Impressionism and the Paris Millinery Trade, it looks like it's just an art book, but what it actually is it's about hats. It's a book about hats and the Impressionist artists that took a lot of inspiration from the people who created these huge hats in what was known as the beautiful epic that was between the end of the Franco-Prussian War in 1870 and the beginning of World War I in 1914. It was a time of beauty and lots of hats. We also have clothing art, the visual culture of fashion from 1600 to 1914 by Eileen Ribeiro. This goes into a little more depth about artists and the relationship to clothing and how, beginning in the 17th century, which is the 1600s, the attitude towards dress began to change. And this was not only reflected in in the clothes, but in the art that was made about the clothes, and then how that relationship between art and clothing developed over time until, again, the end of the Belle epoch.
Wow.
Yes, exactly. A great big book with lots of beautiful pictures. And then finally, we have Paris Refashioned, 1957 to 1968. Talks about how, after World War II, the whole Industrial Revolution had already it had happened. Ford had changed the world with his assembly lines. The culture had changed. And, the culture of fashion changed because we had ready-to-wear clothes. People didn't make so much their own clothes anymore, and you could go to the rack and buy off the rack. And, in Paris had been the fashion capital of the world with their salons that created clothing for specific people. And, they were the ones who said, well, this is what's fashionable and this is what's not. Well, Paris had to scramble to keep up with what people were actually wearing. And so it talks about the relationship between the Paris fashion designers and the clothes of everyday people in the 60s and the 70s. And so, you have a lot of pictures from magazines like Vogue and stuff like that. And it goes from formal wear to what you would wear just, on a day out. But again, lots of beautiful color pictures about the changes in fashion in the 60s and 70s and how Paris had to change to keep up with the rest of the world. Paris Refashioned, 1957 to 1968. Bring a nice solid bag when you come to the library for these. It's going to be a lot to get at home.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, that's good. Becky, there's time for you to do one more book.
I have time for one more. So, Agatha Christie, in real life, disappeared for 10 days.
Yes.
And nobody knows what happened during those 10 days. She's always claimed amnesia. Well, this book by Andrew Wilson is what happened to Agatha Christie during her 10-day disappearance. So this is called The Talent for Murder. As we all know, Agatha Christie would be like the person to go to if you wanted to
Kill off the whole town.
About murder. Okay, so she disappeared in the winter of 1926. And Andrew Wilson found an article that also in 1926, a journalist named Una was found dead. So I'm going to say that this is based around that. I don't know if that's true, but I'm kind of guessing. So it all starts with her out on a train platform, and she gets pushed, and somebody grabs her to save her. And she's like, oh, I'm so lucky, whatever.
She meaning Agatha Christie?
Agatha Christie.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And the man says, well, you think you're lucky, but I know some things about you, and it turns out that he's blackmailing her. And he says, you're going to disappear for 10 days. And while you're gone, you're going to commit the perfect murder. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so real quick, there's a doctor and his wife and some poison and
a train,
a faked death, and in the end there's actually 3 deaths.
Real ones?
Real deaths. 1 faked, 3 real. And did Agatha do it or not? So there you go. Once again, A Talent for Murder. It's on the new shelf of the adult fiction section by Andrew Wilson.
Great, thank you. Oh, that's exciting. And Kathan, in 3 minutes, can you talk about your last one?
I'll talk about one that I didn't bring.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about, yes, in 3 minutes. This is a graphic novel. I've been getting some new graphic novels, and it's a really cute story. It's called Lint Boy, and it's by Eileen Lichten. I can't even say it. Lichten. Lint Boy and Lint Bear live in their cozy dryer home until the day that Lint Bear is snatched away by a cruel woman with a vendetta against dolls. And it goes through, it's sort of like Roald Dahl, Tim Burton put together. It's a compelling tale of good and evil. And it's just really cute. It's Lint Boy spends a lot of time trying to find his brother, Lint Bear. And they're just, you know, the lint from your dryer. And he comes
Personified.
They come to the home of this woman who has all these dolls and cages, because when she was a child, she swears that one of her dolls could move, and she wants to find out whether this is true or not. So she bashes the cages and, you know, is cruel, dunks them in water and all sorts of things. But in the end, good prevails. Good. But it's a really cute little graphic novel, and I would have brought it with me, but it wasn't available at the time. So I will recommend that. And other graphic novels. I have more than just graphic novels for teens in the graphic novel collection. We also have a lot of children's graphic novels, and we also have the graphic novel collection on the second floor for adults. So there's something for everybody.
Great.
And graphic novels are reading as well. Don't anybody get that wrong. We have people who
reading
feel like
with lots of pictures.
It's reading, and it's a different way of reading. And I encourage people who have reluctant readers in their lives to maybe introduce them to some graphic novels. It doesn't mean that's all they have to read, but it certainly is a beginning, and sometimes it's just an addition to the joy of reading.
Great, thank you. That's good. Well, we could go on all day. We probably would if we could. But you can come to the library and talk with us there, and we will chat and hear your stories, and that will be good. So come to the library, and we will see you there. Thanks. Bye-bye.